Hi geometry students, and welcome to lesson 9.4, volume of prisms and cylinders. And before I go on, I just want to remind you that it is imperative, extremely important, that you have your index cards and that you are writing the different formulas, because you will need to remind yourself of the different steps, the different formulas. Are you looking for surface area? Are you looking for a slanted height? So it's really important just to keep these all really organized. So we're going to be moving on to lesson 9.4. And in 9.4, we are going to be looking at prisms and cylinders. So let's take a look at our first section on page 500, all the way up to 500, hard to believe. And I want you to think about, I don't know if you've ever played this game or not, but it was called Break the Ice. And my kids had it when they were little. And you would put all of these little 1 by 1 inch, or maybe they were a tad bigger than that. I don't think they were as big as 2 inches. But anyway, you put these little 1-inch blocks in this frame, and then you would stand it up and you would have these little mallets and you would try to hit the little 1-inch blocks out. I don't know how many there were. Maybe there were 16, maybe there were 25. I'm not sure. But that's kind of what this looks like, these little 1-inch blocks. Now, I don't know if any of you have an old-fashioned refrigerator or have seen old-fashioned ice cube trays, but this also reminds me of that. You'd have an ice cube tray that would have maybe 10 or 12 blocks of ice. So that's what I want you to think in terms of. Now, it says here it wants us to find the volume of this big box, so the whole big box, by determining how many unit cubes fit into the box. And the little unit cubes are 1 by 1 by 1. So they're 1 inch long, 1 inch high, and 1 inch wide. And so we can see here that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we're looking at one side of the box. And then we see the other side of the box, we see 1, 2, 3. But if we were to fill it up with row after row after row after row, it looks like we could get 4 rows in there. So there would be 4 units up. So the base is going to be 5 units by 3 units, or 15 unit cubes. Our need to cover the base. But then we need to think, okay, how many will it take to fill the box? And we know we can come up 4. And so the 4 times the 15, which is what we came up with for the base, would be 60. So the volume of this box is 60 cubic units. Hopefully that wasn't too hard. Okay, the volume of a prism. The process used in example 1 can be used to determine the volume of any prism. So in order to figure out how many rows of ice cubes we can put in this box, or prism now we'll call it, first we find the base. So we figure out how many 1-inch cubes can go across, how many 1-inch cubes will go down this way, and then we have to figure out how many rows high they could go. And that's how we come up with the volume in a prism. So here is our formula. This should go on an index card. You should also probably write some notes or some reminders from the previous 2 slides. I will put the PowerPoint up on Sycamore, so if you want to go slide by slide and write down anything that's important. But our volume equals the base that we've already determined times the height. And so now let's take a look at an example of that. Again, sorry for my wonky, sometimes my angles on when I take pictures of the book are a little bit off, so we've got a slanted thing going on here. So it wants us to find the volume of the prism. So we know first that we need to begin with the 7 times 4. Well, what is the base going to turn out to be? 7 times 4. and then we're going to have 5 rows. That's how I always remember. 5 rows high of that times 5. And so 140 is our answer. 7 times 4 is 28 times 5 then apparently comes out to 140. I did not do this on my calculator. Then we're going to look at B. And if you think about this one, now this particular prism is laying on the triangle base. So we don't have the issue that we had before where it was sitting straight up. It is actually laying on its triangle. So if we need to find the base of a triangle, we know that that is 1/2 base times height. That makes sense because it's 1/2 of a square. So the 8 times 6 is going to be 48. Half of that is 24, and then times 3. 24 times 3 is going to be 72. So make sure you make yourself a little note that triangle bases, and if you have to redraw them to be able to see that versus the rectangular, then do so. But remember, you're going to do 8 times 6, but then you have to make it half. So just remember that as you go. All right, let's do some samples here. And so this one we have is 9 times 4. So 9 times 4, or 4 times 9, is 36. So our base is 36. And then 6 times 36, I actually need to check and see what that math is, will come out to 216. So first, 9 times the 4 is going to be 36. Then how many rows high can we go in that box? 6. 36 times 6, 216. Then we have one that is 5 centimeters, 5 centimeters. So we do the 5 times 5. We come up with 25. And then times 5 would be 125. So the only difference in your triangular base, like this, is that it's 1/2 the base. Remember, 1/2 of the base is what you're looking for. Okay, let's move on to our cylinders. And our cylinders, the method for finding the volume of a cylinder is the same for finding the volume of a prism. It's just going to look a little different. We're not going to have the angles. We're going to have a circle. So the volume of a cylinder is going to equal the area of the base, what's sitting against the table, this right here, times the height. How tall is it? And we know that to find the base of a cylinder, it's going to be pi times r squared. So hopefully you have that in your notes already, because now we're starting to get multiple steps, so you need to be really careful that you're covering all the steps. So let's look at an example. The volume of the cylinder, as I just said, this should be on your index card. Volume equals base times height. But to get the base, you're going to multiply pi times r squared. And that's how you get the b. That's how you get the base. And then you multiply it times the h. So let's do that. In this problem, and if you look on page 502, I have put this example right in here. And so you are going to begin to by finding the base. And hopefully you remember how to find that base. That's pi times r squared. So we'll use my trusty calculator. Okay, I've got the calculator, so we will use that now to determine our base first of all. And so we are going to, I'm just making sure I have the right problem here. Yes. So making sure you have the right thing, pi times r squared. So the radius is 2 feet. So we're going to do 2 times 2. That's 4, and then times 3.14. And that comes up to 12.56. So it might be helpful if you're doing this along with me. And then that way you can see if you're getting the same answer. Then we know that the height is 3, so we multiply times 3. And we come up with, I come up with a decimal answer of 37.68, which means that you would need to round that off to 38. And that indeed is the correct answer. All right, now let's take a look at another one. Now this one is kind of, if you think about a toilet paper roll, it's laying on its side. But if we were to stand it straight up, this right here is our base. This is number 5 on page 502. So first we have to figure out what the base measure is. So 1 times 1, that's the radius, times 3.14 is going to be, hopefully you figured this out in your head, 3.14. And then we multiply it times the height, because if we stood this up, it would be 5 inches high. So times 5, and it's going to be 15.7, or you can round it off to 16. So I think these measures or these formulas are a little bit easier to use than the ones in the previous lesson. But hopefully this helps. I will put both sets of PowerPoints up on our classroom page so that you can go slide by slide if you want to use these same pictures on your index cards. You can either print them out or you can just rewrite the examples and make sure that you've got all of that information there. I do think we will probably have a quiz on Wednesday on some of these things, so be aware of that. Make sure you have those index cards. And I think that's all I have. Bring any homework questions that you might have, and we will go over them in class. Thank you for your attention.